December 8th, 2024. That night, the Assad regime finally fell. For the first time in decades, the gates of Saydnaya prison were opened, and what came out wasn't human. It was nightmares walking on 2 feet. Tens of thousands are dead. More than 250,000 are missing. Nobody knows where they went, or if they're even alive. The torture methods went beyond anything you could ever imagine. Executions that looked more like rituals from hell. Things no one had ever heard of before. The screams never stopped. Women raped in front of their husbands. Children born in cells who have never seen sunlight. And men tortured in the most brutal ways until they lost everything. And death became their only wish. Everything you've ever seen in serial killer stories, everything you thought was too much in horror movies, was nothing but basic training for what happened here. But the real shock was what they found later. Hidden cameras in every cell. Every second of torture recorded and sold on the dark web. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching this video now was once one of those spectators. This video took me over a month to make, so don't forget to drop a like and share your thoughts in the comments. But before we step into the gates of this nightmare, we need to go back a bit to understand how it all began, how Saydnaya was born, and how it became the one place even demons fear to enter.
أقسم بالله العظيم وأن أرعى مصالح الشعب وحرياته.
November 13, 1970. Hafez al-Assad staged a military coup known as the Corrective Movement. He seized power, overthrowing President Nuruddin al-Atassi. But within days, Hafez began eliminating the very people who had helped him rise, one by one. At the top of that list, his closest friend, Salah Jadid. Then, he handed over the state's most sensitive institutions, the army, intelligence, and security services, to his own family. He built a system sealed by blood, a regime where loyalty wasn't optional, it was survival. That was the beginning of a new era. Its motto, loyalty or extinction. Those who opposed were erased, those who whispered, crushed. Day after day, the security grip tightened, until even breathing felt monitored. But the pressure kept building. Years of fear had birthed a generation fueled with rage and revenge. Then came June 1979, the first spark. An officer named Ibrahim al-Yusuf, a member of the Fighting Vanguard, the militant wing of the Muslim Brotherhood, decided to strike the regime right at its heart. He gathered around 200 cadets and officers inside the Attorley School in Aleppo under the pretext of holding a training seminar on military law. And the moment the doors were locked, he opened fire. In a matter of seconds, the room turned into a slaughterhouse. Everyone inside, mostly Alawite cadets, being groomed for key intelligence positions, fell where they stood. For the Assad regime, this wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of sectarian war. And from that moment on, the machine of vengeance began to turn. Mass arrests, midnight raids, and executions without trial. Anyone connected, or even suspected, was taken or killed on the spot. From that point forward, Syria wasn't governed, it was avenged. Months passed, but the fire never went out. June 26, 1980, Damascus. Inside the presidential palace, as Hafez al-Assad walked down the hallway to greet an official delegation, something unthinkable happened. Members of the defense brigades, his own guard, suddenly raised their weapons and opened fire. Bullets ripped through the walls. Screams echoed through the corridors. But Assad survived, by miracle, coincidence, or maybe fate wasn't just done with him yet. The reaction was pure madness. Shock turned into obsession, and obsession into limitless revenge. He ordered the complete extermination of anyone whose loyalty was even slightly in doubt. The command was ruthless. Crush everyone connected to the attack. Every rebel, every suspect, every whisper of defiance, no mercy. The first place to feel that fury was Tadmor prison, and that's where Rifat al al-Assad, Hafiz's brother and bloodiest enforcer, stepped into the light. He led thousands of troops from the defense brigades and stormed the prison. But it wasn't a raid, it was a massacre. The assault began before dawn. Doors shattered, gunfire came before the screams. Soldiers ran through the corridors, shouting, beating, shooting in every direction. The cells turned into slaughterhouses. Blood coated the floors and walls alike. No one asked who was political prisoner and who wasn't. Everyone died. Hundreds were dragged into the prison yard, lined up in rows, and the killing began. Heavy machine guns swept across the crowd. Bodies dropping, piling up, blood flooding the ground. No trials, no charges, not even a question. The message couldn't be clearer. If your loyalty is in doubt, you die. After Tadmor, the country exploded. Between 1981 and 1982, the Muslim Brotherhood launched assassinations and bombings, and the regime answered with fire and steel. Every Sunni city was branded a terrorist nest. Every young man with a beard or even a hint of suspicion was taken, and most never came back. Then came February 1982, the city of Hama. Protests and rebellion had broken out. Hafiz al-Assad decided to end it once and for all. He ordered his brother Rifat to move in. The defense brigade stormed the city. Tanks and artillery pounded it without pause. Warplanes bombed from above. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Families buried alive under their own homes. Within a month, whole districts vanished. The city became an open-air graveyard. Estimates say 40,000 civilians were killed, tens of thousands injured, and over 100,000 missing. But the real numbers were far worse. After the massacre, the bodies were left in the streets. A message written in blood, meant to burn fear into everyone's heart. And the message was received. But even that wasn't enough. The terror they unleashed in the cities didn't satisfy them. They wanted something worse. A place to torture the human soul itself. A place where no scream could escape, no smell could reach the air, no trace of humanity would survive. A place that turned people into numbers. And that's how the idea of the new slaughterhouse was born. A prison that wasn't really a prison, but a factory of death. Its name, Saydnaya. Saydnaya prison, north of Damascus, was built in 1987, designed to be the most secure prison in the world. It consists of 3 massive buildings that all connect at a central point known as the gun. That's where the prison administration and the high security command offices are located. Each building has 3 floors. Each floor is split into 2 wings, and each wing holds 10 small cells, lined up along narrow hallways that look more like a maze. Ventilation is nearly non-existent. Each 4 rooms share a single tiny vent, barely wide enough for air to pass through. The prison is divided into 2 main sections, the white section and the red section. The white section was considered the lighter one, but here, lighter simply means you don't die quickly. People ended up there for small, almost meaningless reasons. Someone posted a comment against the regime. Someone made fun of the president's photo. Someone passed a checkpoint and the officer didn't like his face. Or maybe someone with a grudge wrote a fake report out of spite. In Syria, you didn't have to be a criminal to disappear. All it took was one word, one wrong look, one unlucky moment. Inside the white section, they don't kill you fast. They let you rot slowly. They starve you. They keep you awake for days. They make you wish for death and then make sure it doesn't come. Those who leave the white section never come out the same. They come out broken, deranged, missing parts of themselves, body or soul. If they're lucky, they come out alive, but paralyzed, mutilated, or half insane. Then comes the red section. This is where they send political prisoners, dissidents, and anyone the regime deems unforgivable. A single thought, a word, or a whisper of defiance, that's enough to send you there. Torture in the red section has no rules, no limits, and no trace of of mercy. But before we go inside this hell, we need to understand why they called it the Red. July 5th, 2008. Years of torture, humiliation, and deprivation had finally reached a breaking point. During a routine cell inspection, an officer tore up a Quran and stepped on it. A deliberate provocation aimed at the Muslim prisoners. A scream rose up and the cells erupted. Prisoners attacked the guards, overpowered them, and seized their weapons. Blood was everywhere. The jailers became the jailed. Frightened of a public scandal that would shake the regime's image, the regime sent Asif Shaukat, Bashar al-Assad's brother-in-law, accompanied by senior officers. They promised the inmates better treatment, a review of files, and fair trials. The prisoners believed them. The hostages were released, and calm returned to the compound. But it was a trap. 2 days later, 1,200 soldiers and 10 officers stormed the prison, emptied the cells, confiscated prisoners' belongings, and resumed random beatings. The inmates realized they'd been deceived. They snapped and rose up, taking the guards captive. Yes, 1,200 soldiers and officers, many armed only with sticks and batons, ended up prisoners in the hands of the inmates. When the situation spiraled out of control, Maher al-Assad intervened. The 4th Division was mobilized, and artillery shells began to fall. Dozens were killed. Forces then stormed the prison and retook it by brutal force. The cells involved in the uprising witnessed savage torture and mass killings. Over 1,000 prisoners were killed, and roughly 240 soldiers and officers also died. Survivors didn't escape further cruelty. They were tortured and forced to smear the prison walls with the blood of their comrades. That horror is why the place became known as the Red Section. After the massacre, everything changed in Saydnaya. Old cell doors were replaced by armored steel ones. Overcrowding and deprivation intensified. Torture reached new levels, and every step a prisoner took was watched by an unblinking eye. The prison's security became airtight, organized on 3 levels. Level 1, military police and the 3rd Division, guarding the outer walls to stop any escape or breach. Level 2, internal prison administration, watching every move and torturing inmates without mercy. Level 3, not human, minefields inside and outside, anti-personnel and anti-tank, plus a complex monitoring system for all wired and wireless communications. Even the faintest whisper could not escape their notice. Escape? Impossible. Even thinking about it was a crime. The Syrian security state was a jungle of branches. Military intelligence, Air Force intel, general intelligence, political security, state security, the Republican Guard, the 4th Division, the Intelligence Bureau, each one with dozens of offshoots in every town and neighborhood. Rank or specialty didn't matter. Anyone could pick you up, interrogate you, and torture you without a warrant or any law to back it up. Arrests came with zero warning. They'd show up out of nowhere, smash the door, storm in like they were raiding a war front. They'd shout, beat people, terrify the kids, and drag you out barefoot, half asleep, with no idea why. From that moment on, you vanished. No agency would admit holding you, and your family started a nightmare of its own. Branch to branch, official to official. Always the same answer: we don't have that name. The regime turned enforced disappearance into policy, a tool to plant fear in every home. Families paid huge sums to find out whether their son alive, dead, or which branch was holding him. Every move, every word, every breath was counted against you. The trip to the prison was the start of hell. From the moment they grabbed you, the beatings and insults began. Before you even knew the accusation, one jailer arrested after the regime fell put it coldly: we had 72 methods of torture, and every jailer had to memorize them all. When I said Saydnaya was engineered for psychological torture before physical pain, I wasn't exaggerating. Brace yourself, the horror starts now.
أول دقيقة بسيدنايا تمنيت إني أرجع على سرية المداهمة والاقتحام، تمنيت إني أرجع على فرع 215 وعيش فيه 200 سنة تعذيب مقارنة مع أصوات التعذيب بسيدنايا. يعني هونيك ما بس قلبك بيرجف. بسجن سيدنايا صوت التعذيب مختلف، الخوف اللي بقلبك يعني مختلف، مو مثل باقي الأفراد.
Now you step into Saydnaya prison. The moment you cross that iron gate, the air changes. Heavy, choking, soaked with the smell of blood and rust. Before anyone even touches you, the psychological torture begins. You'll see bodies hanging from chains, flayed skin, mutilated faces. Some are still breathing, some are dead, and some just wish to die. Screams fill the place. A man's howl, a woman's moan, a child's cry. They're blasted through loudspeakers all over the prison. The noise never stops, day or night. Like the place's soundtrack. Every second someone is being tortured and you're waiting for your turn. Then an officer will ask your name. You'll answer with your real name. And a hard slap will send you to the floor. A sharp voice will bark. Forget your name. From now on, you're number X. They often write the number on your forehead so they can identify you.
واني قلت تنسى اسمك مازن الحمانة. قلت له شو اسمي؟ واني يقول اسمك 1858. قال اعيد شو اسمك؟ قلت له 1858. قال تنسى مازن الحمانة. هذا اسمك الجديد.
Next comes the welcome party. First they strip you completely, then the beating starts. Sticks, metal wires, other torture tools. Each blow able to tear flesh or leave you with a wound so deep it might take a piece of you. If you scream or show pain, the torture gets worse. Your cry disturbs them. Many don't survive their first day. The pain and shock are too much. And you ask yourself why? Why all this hatred? Why such cruelty and sadism before they even know who I am or what I did? Honestly, I don't even know why I'm here. The answer is simple, my friend. The regime picked its kind. They didn't hire normal people as jailers. They chose the mentally ill, failures, those who were humiliated their whole lives and came to hate society. Outcasts with grudges, suddenly holding absolute power over human beings. Listen, my friend, imagine handing a pack of serial killers, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, kind of people, thousands of innocent lives and saying, do whatever you want, no account, no mercy.
فهون أنا عم بسمع صوت مشان الله وفلتوني وكهرباء وعصي حديد وضرب الحديد وعياط وصريخ وريحة الدم عم تطلع، يعني عن جد من جوا ريحة الدم طالعة، يعني ريحة دم. بتفوت أنت لجوا دغري بيقول لك سلاح بس ضل تركض حركة سجود. طبعا نحن دغري بنركض حركة سجود، بقى بنصير نصف صفوف 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 مثل كأنه واحد بجامع وصافين عم يسجدوا العالم. بلش هون القتل فينا دوب دوب دوب، ضرب 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 في عالم يعني عن جد ما تحملت، فرطت تلتت بالأرض، فتحت إيديها ورجليها، خلص إنه بكفي. بلشوا فيني كهرباء، ضرب بالعصي، بواري الحديد، يعني وصلت لمرحلة إنه خلص أنا رح موت، إنه صرت أتشاهد. قام شو بيقوم بيقول له خلص اتركه لسه العذاب قدامه كتير. بيقوم بيمدلي بوطه، شو بيقول لي يلا لمع لي بوطه بلسانه.
After the welcome party, you get tossed into one of the horror stations. The first place might be the solitary, but solitary doesn't mean alone. It's a cell meant for one person, but inside you will find 10 or 15 men, each squeezed into 30 cm, patch of standing space, room only to stand, no sitting, no sleeping. Air is nearly non-existent, humidity suffocates, and the stench is a mix of sweat, blood, and filth. Speaking or moving is forbidden. Even a whisper can cost you your life. Prisoners were kept them like that for days, forced to stand in their own filth. Many died on their feet, unable to endure the pain. Or you might be thrown into a twilight cell full of filth, often with corpses of people who died under torture stuffed inside.
تفوت على التواليت الأول تلاقي جثث بالأرض مصفطات فوق بعضها. لا مش وايد. تفتح تسكر الباب، تفتح التواليت الثاني تلاقي لك زي جثتين. لحظة شو وين أنا يا الله؟ تصير تحكي حالك وين أنا يا أخي؟ تحس حالك راح تجن.
The worst place is the cold room. They call the salt room. The floor is covered with half a meter of salt. That salt preserves bodies, leaving bloated, twisted corpses in front of you. They'll toss you among them, raw with cuts and bruises. The salt bites into your wounds like fire. The sight will break you mentally. You'll try to rest, but you're surrounded by death on every side. In your head, a single line will repeat. This is how you're going to end. happened. See all this? Still no one's asked who you are or what your charge is. No interrogation has started. The entire process so far is just reception, designed from minute one to break your spirit. Saydnaya doesn't just torture the body. It knows how to burn the soul from inside. There was a young man named Omar, one of the prisoners. One day, a guard walked into his cell with a strange smile and asked, "Tell me, where is your favorite childhood song?" Omar thought maybe the man had a soft side, a bit of mercy left in him. He smiled faintly and said, "Captain Rabe, I used to love that song." The guard grinned wider. "Nice, I'll bring it for you." The next day, the guard came back, called out, "Where is the one who loves Captain Rabe?" Omar raised his hand, thinking maybe for a brief second that something good is about to happen. The guard took him to another room, played the song he loved most, and began torturing him. Brutally, methodically, without pause.
مثل هاليوم بفترة أعياد الميلاد وعيد رأس السنة إجا السجان وسألني سؤال جميل جدا: شو هي الغنية اللي ربيت عليها؟ شو هي الغنية اللي بتحبها رح أحط لك إياها؟ فأنا ما كان عندي وقت أفكر، فقلت له غنية الكابتن رابح، غنية لبرامج أطفال كنت أتفرج عليه لما كنت صغير، كون أنا كنت معتقل كطفل، فما كان عنده الغنية على هاتفه. فبعد يومين رجع السجان وقال وينه هذا صاحب غنية الكابتن رابح، وإجا واختارني وحط الغنية وبلش يعذبني.
The goal was simple: destroy every good memory he ever had. Now, every time Omar hears that song, he remembers the screams, the pain, the smell of blood. The same method, the same cruelty, repeated again and again. A young woman once said that an officer pulled her from her cell and asked, "Tell me, whose voice do you love to hear when you listen to the Quran?" Terrified, she whispered the name of the reciter. The officer opened his laptop, played a recitation with that same beloved voice, and while the words of God filled the room, he raped her brutally. Her voice shook as she told her story. She said, "That voice used to calm me when I was little. Now I can't hear it anymore. Every time I do, it takes me right back to that moment." The same as Omar. The goal was to destroy every trace of comfort, to turn the things that once helped you into your instruments of pain. But psychological torture didn't stop there. Guards would pick random prisoners, tell them it was their execution day. They'd prepare them, handcuff them, and take them to a small waiting room right next to the execution chamber. Then for hours, they'd leave them there, hearing every scream and gunshot from the next room. Every few minutes, a guard would whisper, "You're next." Then after hours of pure mental collapse, the door opens. "Not today, back to your cell." And a few days later, they'd do it again, over and over, until you stop fearing death and start begging for it. Even food became a tool of torture. The guards would walk in, carrying a hot plate of food. The smell alone could drive you crazy. They'd set it in front of the cell and walk away. The food would sit there for days, rotting, while prisoners starved and breathed from the stench. Then one guard would call out, "You, come get it." The hungry man would kneel, push his head and arms through a small hole at the bottom of the door, and just as he reached out, a single blow to the head, his skull split open, blood splattering on the food. Then the guard would order, "Put the food on his body and eat." In the best days, they'd get a lemon peel, maybe a few crumbs of bread. The goal wasn't to feed them, it was to keep them alive just long enough to suffer more. And when they got bored of breaking you mentally, they'd go straight for your heart. One of the cruelest tools they had was family. They'd arrest your mother, your wife, your daughter, your sister, and put all of you together in one room. Then an officer would walk in, mocking you. "Your sister's beautiful, your wife's cute. Maybe I'll rape her. What do you think?" Imagine being tied up, bleeding, hearing that, watching an officer trying to assault your wife right in front of you, and you can't do anything. You're completely powerless. Imagine the sheer amount of pain and anger you would feel in that moment. And in many cases, it wasn't just talk. They did it right in front of the men. One woman named Lola said, "My husband didn't die from torture. He died from what he saw." Now imagine sitting in your cell when a port guard decided he wants to play. He drags you out and says, "We're playing a little game today." The game, he makes you torture or rape another prisoner. Maybe an old man, maybe a young boy. And if you refuse, they torture you instead until you wish you had obeyed. One former prisoner said, an officer once called him and an elderly man out. The officer smiled and said, "Each of you slap the other. Whoever says ouch first, I'll torture him myself." The young man froze. He couldn't do it. The old man looked at him and said softly, "Do it, son. I don't have much time anyway." But the young man couldn't raise his hand against someone whose father's age. He just looked up and said, "Take me instead." And the officer did. What happened next made him wish for death 1,000 times over.
وحظي السيء انا اجيك مع هذا الاختيار. هو قال لي يا ابني ضرب معلش، قال لك شو ضرب؟ قلت له شو حكيت؟
In Saydnaya, night meant the visit. What I'm about to say is the hardest part of this story. Officers would enter the women's cells and pick the prettiest among them. It went beyond any boundary of crime. The girls would sometimes prefer a beating over what the officers did to them, because physical pain could end. The things those officers did were not something you forget. I think you know what I'm talking about, right? One woman recalled, "He took me into his office, stood close and asked with a sick smile, 'Do you want a party or a private meeting?' She knew exactly what he meant. Party meant he and his buddies would rape her. Private meeting meant he'd be alone. There was no choice. What the officer wanted would happen by force. She whispered, broken, private meeting. Anything to soften it a little. One of the worst testimonies people heard was a girl who'd been arrested as a virgin at 19. Years of daily rape, the same nightmare every day. When she walked out after liberation, she said one line that broke everyone's heart. "I'm 32 now and I have 3 children. I don't know who their fathers are." Imagine that pain. A young woman who spent her best years inside those walls, between screams, torture, and repeated sexual violence. Her children were born there. They never saw sunlight, never knew life outside a cell. And speaking of the children, their situation wasn't much better either.
أصغر طفل كان عمره حوالي 13. هو من الزبداني. هو يجي إلنا طبعا، فإنه المرة صار بالزبداني إنه الثوار سيطروا على دبابة، فحاطينا كلها هي ببهر الولد. طيب يعني طيب بالحال، طب هذا ولد بده يسوق دبابة يعني، فيروح ويرجع دائما. فهو الفكرة إنه كان يستحي يخبي إنه شو صار معه، شو يصير معه، يعني التعذيب اللي صار معه. طبعا نشوف مبين يعني على يوم نشوف يعني في أمور بتبين يعني، بس ما نقدر نقول له يعني، نحترم نحن هذا الشيء. طلع رجع في آثار واضحة يعني، في دماء من الخلف. هو الله يرحمه استشهد.
Another woman was arrested along with her 2-year-old child while she was being brutally beaten and tortured. Her teeth were knocked out. Her little boy sat on the floor, playing with the broken teeth and making sounds until the officer kicked him. The child hit the wall and died instantly. According to survivors, officers would rape women only 2 or 3 times, not out of mercy, obviously, but because new girls arrived every day. So the same officer didn't always have to repeat himself. The guards had a green light. They could do wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted, with no accountability and no fear. Now let's move to execution methods and how bodies were disposed of. Executions in Saydnaya weren't random, they were scheduled. Around 40 people had to die every day, usually on Mondays and Wednesdays. The reason? The place was full and they needed beds for new prisoners. Common methods included the pit, a tight hole built to the size of a body. They would lock a person inside, standing, and leave them there until they died, often forgotten until the smell gave them away. There was also the stake. Victims would be hung hung by their hand and a blade driven into them in a way that caused prolonged suffering. A horrific method called the iron chair involved tying a prisoner to a chair and lighting a fire underneath it until the skin began to melt, and the victim suffers unbearable agony and dies slowly in this manner. The most shocking method reported to the world was the human press. Victims placed between iron plates and crushed by massive weights until the body was reduced to a small mass.
في رقم محدد بده اياه السجان من عدد الموتى، يعني اليوم كل يوم بدهم 40 هذا الشهر، تمام؟ إذا مات 37 قديش بنقص من 40؟ 3. فبيزيعوا أسماء 3 أشخاص حتى يطلعوا يتصفوا بإبرة الهواء.
After death, there was no dignity. The regime handled bodies in many ways, dissolving them in acid, mass graves, burning, or leaving them in salt room I mentioned earlier to slow decomposition, and disturbingly, selling bodies and organs to private medical institutions for training under the table. The press was used often because it was the fastest, and to them, the most convenient method. These weren't isolated incidents. They were tens of thousands. Every corner in that place held a different kind of pain, a scream the world never heard. Saydnaya wasn't just a prison, my friend. It was the biggest marketplace for the mentally sick in the world. Torture wasn't random. It was systematic and profitable. If you still don't get it, I'm talking about the dark web, specifically red rooms. Inside those rooms, torture and killing were streamed live. Payments were made in crypto. Prices varied by the scene. If you paid more, you could pick your victim after they showed you tons of photos and choose how you wanted the torture or death carried out. This is not drama, my friend. Many former prisoners confirmed it. Guards would take pictures of detainees in various humiliating poses. When the opposition entered Saydnaya after the regime fell, they confirmed the worst suspicions. They found cameras in every corner, every cell, from multiple angles. They found huge servers and internet speeds Syrians had never seen, but just hours before the regime's fall. Most of those hard drivers had been removed or burned to destroy the evidence. That's when the truth hit. Saydnaya wasn't a prison. It was a death studio, the largest red room on the dark web. But the regime didn't stop there. The horror escalated. Organized organ trafficking. Survivors weren't the only witnesses. Doctors who worked in military hospitals in Damascus exposed internal mafia networks run by regime. The procedure was chillingly methodical. A detainee whose death was inevitable from torture would be taken to a military hospital. There was no treatment. A sedative would render him unconscious in seconds. And then the real work began. Organs, kidneys, corneas, other sellable parts surgically removed as if the body were spare parts. When they were done, the corpse was disposed of, burned, dissolved, crushed, or placed in salt room as described. Worse still, this wasn't confined to Syria. A trafficking network moved organs through Lebanon to foreign mafias, notably in Iran and Russia. Doctors and officials confirmed direct links between traffickers and high-level security figures in the regime. This wasn't rogue behavior. It was organized and protected from above. After everything you just heard, you might think escaping a place like that is impossible. Yet some people did get out, and one of them changed everything. Mazen Hamada, the witness who blew the lid of Saydnaya. One day, they raided his house and arrested him out of the blue. He woke up inside an intelligence branch building, bound and disoriented. The interrogator asked him bluntly, "What was your weapon?" Mazen, with a ridiculous courage, answered, "My weapon was Toshiba camera." The officer didn't want the truth. He wanted a story they could use. They beat him viciously, trying to force him to say what they wanted to hear. Then one day, an officer came in carrying papers and said, "Sign here quickly. These are your release papers." Mazen, half dead and barely conscious, signed. For a moment he thought he was going home, but when he saw the looks of his fellow prisoners, he realized a new nightmare was beginning. People were crying, saying goodbye. He had no clue why. They blindfolded him and led him out. out. He soon discovered he was being taken to Saydnaya. There, he lived the kinds of horror we've already described, and he saw more than words can hold. Somehow, against all odds, he survived. After he made it out, Mazen reached Europe and started speaking out. Videos, interviews, testimonies. The regime didn't forget him. They chased him with threats, and they attacked the one thing he loved most, his family. They threatened to arrest his mother and siblings if he didn't come back. Mazen, knowing what would happen to them, decided to hand himself in, not because he trusted them, but because he chose to sacrifice himself to save his family. At the border, they arrested him immediately. He vanished. Reports later said he was returned to Saydnaya, subjected to interrogations, beatings, and non-stop torture. They demanded he record a video recanting everything he'd said about the prison. He refused. He refused even knowing the end was near.
قال لي شو كان نوع السلاح اللي معك؟ قلت له كاميرا توشيبا وما شلت سلاح أنا وأنا بكره حمل السلاح. وإني يقول لي ما بدي الاعترافات. خذوا. أخذوني مددوني بالأرض، كسروا لي ضلاعي هاي، يطلع فوق ويدبج فوقي، تحس هاي طق 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 ضلاعك هاي لو يقلبك بالعكس على ظهرك يطلع يدبج فوقك، دفر على وجهك بكاس بالعصي. وإنه يقول يبدو انك ما بدك تعترف، انت بدك تعترف، ما اعترفت بدنا نقتلك. قلت له ما هاي اللي عندي.
Mazen died, but he never yielded. He became a symbol for the revolution. His voice after death was louder than the voices of his torturers.
And how do you feel about the people who did that to you?
في الله بيحسبه، في قضاء بيحسبه. راح اسعى الا ما اجيبه مع المحكمة واخذ حقي بالقانون، حقي وحق رفقاتي اللي قتلوا. لو بتكلفني حياتي بدي لاحقهم ولا بجيبه مع القضاء.
And painfully, the regime killed him days before its fall. I wish Mazen had lived long enough to see those who wronged him behind bars or on the gallows. But fate had the last word. Mazen's testimony wasn't the end. Others came forward, determined to tell the truth, no matter the price. One of them was Omar, the young man whose story I told earlier, who survived by a miracle. Omar's whole family was abroad. He was alone in the cell, sick with tuberculosis and close to death. His relatives never gave up. They tried every channel, reached out to many intermediaries, until someone agreed to help for $20,000. For an average Syrian family, that was a fortune. But they had no choice. They paid. And Omar was released. To the guards, Omar was practically dead. So why waste the money on a corpse? It was a profitable deal. $20,000 was better than the cost of disposing of a body. When he came out, no one recognized him. Her mother could hardly believe her eyes. He looked like a ghost. Syrian hospitals refused to treat him. Once people learned he'd been in Saydnaya, he was immediately labeled an enemy of the regime. They moved him to Turkey, where he slowly recovered. And then to Sweden. There, he decided to tell everything. He stepped up in front of the world and testified about the massacres that happened every day in those prisons. Even speaking before the US Congress. His testimony was powerful and painful, but legally weak. That's when another hero changed the game, Kaysar. Kaysar wasn't an activist or a rebel. He was just an ordinary officer, working in the military police's forensic department. His job was simple: document the bodies sent in from Syria's prisons. He photographed them, logged their numbers, and filed the reports. But after a while, what he saw was unbearable. Every day new corpses, burned faces, broken bones, bodies starved and beaten to death. The scenes began to eat away at his conscience. He started thinking about defecting, but he waited, choosing to gather evidence first. So he kept working, acting normal, but secretly copying every image, photo after photo, day after day, until he had over 55,000 pictures, each one a frozen scream, proof of systematic systematic torture and murder inside Syrian prisons. When he was sure he had enough, he made his move. He fled the country, first reaching Qatar, where lawyers and human rights organizations helped coordinate his case. And from there, the bomb dropped, the Qaisar file. He showed the world the evidence, faces, numbers, dates, and the horrifying methods used to kill. The photos were beyond shocking. Bloated corpses, shattered limbs, people starved to skin and bone. They were shown before the US Congress and soon after broadcast on every major news outlet. The entire world had saw the truth the regime had buried for years. The impact was massive. Global outrage erupted, and soon after came the Qaisar Act, a US law imposing economic and political sanctions on the regime and anyone who dared to work with it. For years, Qaisar stayed anonymous, hiding his face and name to protect his family. But after the regime finally fell, he stepped into the light.
لأول مرة تظهر بالصوت والصورة يا قيصر، والجميع يتشوق لمعرفتك. فمن هو قيصر؟
أنا المساعد أول فريد المذهان، رئيس قلم الأدلة القضائية بالشرطة العسكرية بدمشق، المعروف بقيصر، ابن سوريا الحرة. أنا من مدينة درعا، مهد الثورة السورية.
The same man who photographed the horror became one of the key witnesses to the crime of the century. After long, bloody years, the Syrian revolution finally won. The people broke free from a tyrant, from a system built on pain and death. Assad fell, but what he left behind wasn't a country. It was ruin, scars, a memory soaked in grief. What you've just heard isn't just the story of a prison. It's the story of a regime that lived on blood. From Tadmor to Hama, and from Hama to Saydnaya. The faces changed, but the cruelty stayed the same. A father handed power to his son and paced down the same blood, the same demons, and the same slaughterhouses. Qaisar revealed only a fragment of the truth, but there are still hundreds of thousands missing, gone for years, with no trace, no graves, no names. Each of those hundreds of thousands hides a story, a name, a family, a life that once dreamed of tomorrow. Justice may take its time, but it never disappears. And one day, the truth will rise. No matter how deep they tried to bury it, that day will come, when every wall that once echoed with screams would crumble, and everything happened inside Saydnaya will be told, sound by sound, image by image, until nothing is left unspoken.
100 وردة 100 وردة لكل سوري عانى 50 سنة معاناتنا نظام مجرم 100 وردة لكل سوري طلع للشارع وطالب بالحرية 100 وردة لمئات الآلاف من المعتقلين اللي خسروا أمل إنه ممكن بيوم من الأيام
I'm Darius, and this was the story of Saydnaya prison. If you've made it this far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support, my friend, is what keeps me going. Catch you in the next one.